Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. I'm your host Terry. So what is it? It's Wednesday, about 13:28, and so far today I've made it 188 miles. So I slept in because I was like, I'm gonna wait and see what the weather's doing, because the storm was coming in. So I'm like, I'm just gonna wait and see. So I woke up, and then I was like, man, I really need to use the bathroom, and not the kind of bathroom that I really want to just go out behind my trailer and do. So I was like, let me go inside, and since I have like unlimited showers at Love's, I was like, I'll just get a shower, and so I couldn't do it remotely, so I went into the store, and I got to the door, and there was a sign that said showers and bathrooms are down because I don't know. Well, it didn't say why. So I asked, and they said, we got some water issues, which made me glad that I took a shower last night. I know some people like to take showers in the morning. I like to take them at night, but I'm glad I did. So then I was like, okay, well, that's kind of making my decision to get on the road for me. And so, I could see the traffic on 81, and I was, like I said, I was down in Southern Virginia. I was southwestern Virginia. I was at exit 24. So I'm like, all right, so I've been looking at the radar, and so I get to the point, I'm like, all right, well, I need to go up the road somewhere so I can use the bathroom. So I get out on 81, and it was about 30 degrees. It was snowing, light snow. I get out on 81. The road surface is basically just wet, just a lot of road spray. So I'm like, okay, cool. As I progressed up 81, I saw, the salt trucks, salt/plow trucks parked on the shoulders in different places, in the median, but nobody was putting anything down. But it was like, okay, we don't need to. So fast forward, I get up to Roanoke, I go through the way station, and when I start getting north of exit like 150, it starts deteriorating a lot. And my driver manager was like, hey, I think as you get farther north, it'll get better, because he'd asked me what the weather was like down where I was. Well, it turns out that wasn't the case, and it's changing constantly. So as I got up here north of Lexington, so where 64 and 81 are together, I get up north of Lexington, and it's snowing heavier, and it was snowing heavier getting north of Roanoke, but then north of Lexington, or in Lexington, the roads started getting slushier and slushier, and then I only saw like one plow, and I just was feeling like, and by the way, the temperature dropped quite a bit, because like I said, when I left Meadowview, it was 30 degrees. And right now here, and so I'm stopped at exit 213 where the Love's with the NAF is. This is, it's considered Stanton, but it's south of Stanton by a few miles. But yeah, the temperature is like 18. So coupled with the slush build, and that's a ticket, right? Like the salt's obviously going to work better the closer it is to the freezing temperature. So at 18 degrees, water is freezing a lot faster than at 30. And I say that without actually knowing if that's true. I don't know. Does water freeze at the exact same rate? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it would, but then again, it's science. And a lot of people are wrong about science, and I could be wrong here. So anyway, I was like, man, I'm just gonna get off, because there is supposed to be a break in this weather at some point. So I set an alarm for 1 a.m. I'm about 2 hours away from my delivery place. So, but again, it's sawdust. I actually made a smart aleck comment on a video that I saw from Erie, Pennsylvania, where all these truckers were piled up and in the median and smashed into each other. And I was like, you know, I'm so grateful that all these truckers that are running like, you know, like transplant organs and all sorts of other vital stuff are willing to drive in this kind of weather. And I was it's a smart aleck comment because truthfully, none of us are hauling anything that's worth wrecking for. And you know, I started seeing people go by me, like this one guy, and you always look in your left side mirror and you see the guy coming up and you're like, hey dude, I don't know if you know this, but you're gonna run into the back of my trailer unless you move to the left at least a couple feet. I started seeing that. I started seeing people, you know, I was doing like 55 miles an hour in the right lane, kind of just safe distance behind the trucks in front of me. And there's still people running up the left lane, which had even more slush in it at, you know, like 70. And I was thinking about this the other day, and you can tell me if I'm like out in left field here, but you know, I was a volunteer firefighter for about 6 years, and so I've been to a fair number of house fires, you know, back in the day. And it always amazes me when the weather's inclement, when the weather's bad on the road, how people don't change their behavior. And I'm not talking about just semis, I'm talking about cars too. People drive the exact same speed when it's like 20 degrees and, you know, freezing rain as they do when it's 80 degrees and sunny. You know, like it'll be nighttime, freezing rain, 20 degrees, and people will drive the exact same speed they always do in the middle of the day, you know, in June when it's sunny and dry out. And but you know, I was kind of like, is there a parallel? Like if somebody was in a house and somebody's like, hey, the house is on fire, would they just be like, well, I don't care, I'm watching my show? Would they just not alter their behavior when the situation appreciably changes? And I don't think that's true. Like most fires I ever went to, people were already outside. They're in their frickin' pajamas, their underwear. They had a blanket wrapped around them. I've seen it in all different ways. But most people like kind of self-rescue from those situations. So I don't understand why it is that people, when they get on the road, they will drive like flippin' maniacs when it's a significantly different scenario. I mean, you know, just like the house is on fire is significantly different than the house isn't on fire and we could just watch our shows on Netflix. So I just, you know, I'm just curious what the pathology is, or whatever you want to say. So anyway, I got a call today, and you never want to get this call when a really famous YouTuber calls you up to call you out. So I got this call from my friend Lyle over at No Hippie Trucking and Transportation. He called me a couple of times. I didn't answer the first time because I was still in bed. And he, you know, but he's like, hey man, why are you bad mouthing real estate as an investment option or whatever? And so I said, oh, well, let's talk about this. You know, I mean, after I calmed him down. He was kind of pissed. But he was at home. So I said, look, I said, my wife and I have rental property, but we only have rental property because we bought the house for a different reason. And what I was alluding to is this. Long ago, I was in law school. I was taking a course called Real Estate Transactions. And the professors were actually two lawyers, this man and this woman, who were both partners at a law firm, a real estate law firm in Baltimore. And one of them told this story about how they had a client who was a doctor. And by the way, doctors are often smart people who make horrible investment choices. But this doctor had a girlfriend in San Francisco. And he's like, hey, I'm thinking about buying a place out in San Francisco. Now, property in San Francisco is just exorbitant, right? It's some of the most expensive residential property in the world. And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about buying this place out there because my girlfriend's out there, and that way I can stay in it when I go out there, but then I'll rent it out the rest of the time. So I don't know if he was doing Verbo. This is kind of before Airbnb, but there've always been short-term rental things, especially in big cities. And the lawyer that was teaching the class, the professor, whatever you want to call him, he said, I always tell clients, do not buy residential real estate that you don't want to live in. And so it turns out that Lyle explained to me, in his gruff kind of way, that all the real estate that he owns, he's lived in before. And and so we kind of were talking, and it turns out we have some things in common, because like at one time my wife and I owned 3 houses, but we rented 2 of them out, but all 3 of those we've lived in, and so the one house that we rent out now, we do okay on it, but that house I actually bought for my mom. Now, my mom passed away in 2009, and then we lived in it for a little while too. But anyway, so that's the first thing, right? Like we and maybe Lyle to a large extent are accidental landlords, right? We didn't set out to become landlords. And I've met people, in fact, I've probably done foreclosures on their properties, that were speculating in real estate. And here's what I wanted to, here's the point of all this, right? Real estate, first of all, it's a myth. It's a myth that real estate appreciates in value, like exclusively. Okay, that's a myth. I could show you a million examples of real estate that did not appreciate in value or appreciated in a negligible amount, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that even to gain that appreciation, you have to put money into it. And when I say you have to put money into it, it's not just the purchase price, right? It's the purchase price, then every single day of every single year that you've owned that property, you have to pay property tax on it. Every single day of every single year, you have to, in most jurisdictions, and I dealt with real estate lawyers all over the country when I used to do foreclosure stuff, you have to have the water turned on, and in many cases the electricity turned on. That's a daily cost. Water and sewer, you can break it down by the day. Electricity, you can break it down by the day, okay? That doesn't even count anything you need to do to actually maintain the property. Like, here's an example. Let's say you bought a property for $100,000 and then you list it a couple years later for $150,000. So you're like, oh, I'm gonna get this 50% return over a 2-year period. That's like 25% a year. But the place needs a new roof. Guess what? You're not gonna get 150 grand for it. It might not appraise at that. It might not even be able to get a loan on it if it needs a new roof. And guess what? That new roof's gonna cost you $20,000 to $40,000. In other words, the appreciation on that is built off of effort. Now, contrast that to a savings account. And I'm just using a savings account. Forget about any like equity investments, bonds, ETFs, whatever it is, Bitcoin, right? Just a savings account. You put $1 in a savings account. If the interest rate is 10% per annum, at the end of a year, you'll have $1.10. You didn't put any more money into it, right? You didn't pay taxes on it. You will pay taxes on the gain, though. That interest is taxed as ordinary income. But you get my point, right? It's passive income. Real estate is not really passive income because it requires constant outgo, even if you pay cash for it. Because remember what I said about taxes? You know how many people have had houses that have been paid off for decades and are still paying taxes, and the taxes go up every year, right? There's a cost to maintaining that. Now, that's all true, but it's also true that you can make big money in real estate. And I was telling Lyle about an example where I bought a house in 2004 in Mesa, Arizona, and my company shut down about a year later, and I sold the house. It just so happened that I sold about 2 months before the market peaked, and I sold that house in like 10 days, right? And it was not a super expensive house, but I took like about 120 grand from closing after 1 year of owning it. 1 year. That would be a good return on $1 million house. It was, but it was like a 40% return on my, and really, it was probably even more because I financed the place. I didn't cough up like 269 cash and then take 119 from the deal extra. I coughed up, a small down payment, made some payments on it, and then took 119, 120 from the deal. So, but I, as I said to Lyle, I said, I just got lucky. It wasn't skill. It wasn't even, it was just a crazy market. People were coming from Cali and buying property in Arizona, driving up the prices. I mean, we put up, like, while the guy was putting up the sign in our yard, somebody knocked on our front door and asked what we wanted for the place. And I bet they would have done a cash deal. And, people were doing all cash deals. People were running prices up. But I just got lucky. So, getting back to what I was saying about don't do this job and have nothing to show for it. If you have a wife and kids, or a spouse and kids, or you're taking care of your parents, whatever it is, right? You're gonna have to have a place for them and you to live. Okay, I don't live out of my truck. I have a home to go home to, but I don't have that house because I alone need a place to put all my junk. I have it because I have a family, and I bought it in 2002. That's the house I live in now. I bought that house in 2002. It's actually the smallest of the 3 that we recently owned. My wife and I have owned a couple other houses over the years. But the thing you got to keep in mind, right, is you don't want to be, some people say they're house poor but they're willing to do it because they look at that as an investment. But what I'm here to tell you is that a lot of people buy real property, which is real estate, in places where the real property is cheap, but it's going to stay that way. It's, like, I go to places and parts of the country where there are houses for sale, and they're nice little houses, but their location is out in the middle of Podunkville. There's nothing around. Well, if you buy that house, you have to hope because then the only way you get money out of it is you either do, a home equity line of credit, you do a cash out refi or something like that, or you sell it. Well, think about it. If a house sat on the market for a year and a half and it was some 70-year-old couple that was selling it, and you bought it and you got a great deal, what do you think it's going to be like in 20 years? Because that house is going to need even more maintenance. But let's say you keep it for 15 years and you're like, oh, I'm going to sell it. How much do you think that's really going to have appreciated? And then when you add up all the money you put into it, what's your return on investment going to be? Because when I say all the money, I mean taxes, water, service, sewer, all whatever it is, right? Or maybe you got a septic tank, you had to have it pumped out every 5 years. Maybe you live on a well, you had to replace the well pump, every 10 years. I don't know. But every dime you put into that, right, if you don't account for it, you're just fooling yourself. Houses, don't let anybody kid you. Houses are expensive to maintain. My wife and I the house we live in is a great house. I love that house. It was built in 1917. We just had to put a roof on it, I don't know, last year. Yeah, last year. This is only February. We had a roof put on it, 30 grand. And it's not even a big house. And, you know, I was climbing around painting and stuff. Houses require a lot of work. You know how much a mutual fund requires? Zero work, right? The savings account, zero work. You just put money in and the money grows. Now, mutual fund could go down, could go up, but you get my point. So if you need a place to live and it makes sense to buy rather than rent, then do it. But unless you want to be like a full-time landlord, I could tell you, like, my wife said she got a text from our renter at 2 o'clock in the morning about the heat. And the thing was, they were upset that they said the heat hadn't been working for 3 weeks. And she's like, first, why am I finding out about it after 3 weeks? It's the winter time. And second, why at 2 o'clock in the morning? Well, because I think the guy that texted her was drunk, but that's another story. But that's what you deal with as a landlord. So if you think being a landlord is a great way to make money, I mean, it can be, but you know, there's a reason why a lot of landlords hire management companies. And I've represented management companies, and I could go into all the pitfalls with doing that. You got like 1 house, 2 houses, 3 houses, you hire a management company. Now there goes your profit, right? Because management companies typically get 10% just to deal with all the bullshit like the 2 o'clock in the morning text messages, which they don't answer and they don't even get. But my point about all of this is that real estate can appreciate, but just use real estate for its intended purpose, which is, you know, you buy a place to live. And if you really want to invest in rental property, you could put money into one of these REITs that, you know, and these real estate investment trusts are buying up property everywhere. They're buying up brand new subdivisions, you know, because truthfully, private equity funds and other, you know, extraordinarily wealthy individuals and entities are trying to make America a society where everybody has to rent. So anyway, be careful. Think about what you're doing. Don't if you're like, oh, this place is the hot new trend, I just read about it in, you know, Fortune magazine. Guess what? You're already getting in on the back end of the deal, right? The guy that bought my house in Arizona, he bought at nearly the top of the market. And it was so funny because I knew what the market was like, because I knew what the comps were. And he was like, oh, I want this fixed. And we were like, no. We wouldn't even fix stuff that he thought needed to be fixed. We're like, no, you don't want it? Fine. We'll find somebody else. Because I got people knocking on my front door wanting to buy my house. They're not even going to a realtor. I was like, no, I'm not doing it. I was in a position of strength. And then the market, by the time, you know, I mean, he might be back to where he started. I mean, I hope he is. But he took a beating for a while on that house. He was definitely underwater, and I could tell you with a high degree of certainty that a lot of people get underwater on houses in a big hurry. And I foreclosed on $1 million properties where people bought, you know, like the market value of the property was $1.1 million, but they paid $1.5 million for it like a year earlier. And then they couldn't handle the payments because their situation changed, or they just didn't want to pay for it. That happens too. But anyway, I hope Lyle accepts my apology, but I hope this demystifies it a little bit. I'm not saying house is bad, mutual fund's good. I'm saying know what you're getting into, and, you know, live in a property that you don't need. You know, you don't need roommates, you know, and live in a property that if you have to move, you know, you can go a month or two without having a renter in there. A lot of people that own rental properties, they would get foreclosed on if they couldn't find a renter for 4 months. They'd be in foreclosure. If you can't handle that, then, you know, why lose everything? And I can tell you in foreclosure, everything you ever put into that property, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. And you know, I know some of you are out there like, well, if they auction the property, you know, and I'm net positive, that shit doesn't happen. I've been to a gazillion property auctions. I even had people sue me because I was the substitute trustee about this. And I can remember a judge being like, no, that's not how this works. Like he said, he was like, no, this is a distressed asset. You don't get market value. Like he understood it. It's like when a car gets repoed, you're like, that car was worth $10,000. And you get a statement from them. They're like, we sold that car for $3,400 and you still owe us $6,000. And people are like, what? That's how it works. So I hope this helps or opens somebody's eyes, and you don't run into the problems that I've seen in the past. Anyway, be safe out there. Looks like the weather's actually clearing up here. Sun's coming out a little bit, but be safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.